Thanksgiving has always been loud in my family. Too many voices, too much history pressed into one small Ohio dining room. The house smelled of roasted turkey and butter and smoke from the oven that my mother never managed to clean properly. The long oak table was set with her old china, and the air buzzed with a kind of forced warmth. I sat near the end, next to my daughter, Lily, who was busy drawing a blue turkey on a napkin. Everyone pretended to care about the meal, but really, they were circling me like hawks waiting to strike. My mother, Elaine, leaned across the table with that brittle smile she saves for holidays. "So, sweetheart," she said, "are you seeing anyone yet? It's been, 3 years?" Her voice was coated in pity and curiosity, a mix I've known since childhood. Before I could answer, my brother, Mark, snorted and muttered, "Maybe she's too busy being supermom." My sister, Jenna, laughed quietly and whispered, "It's just a phase. She'll get tired of playing hero." I should have expected it. Every Thanksgiving turned into some variation of this, my family dissecting my choices, as though I'd handed them the right to judge my life. But that night, the air was heavier. There was something meaner behind their words, something that made my chest tighten. When my father, Robert, finally stood, the silverware clattered against the plates. His face was red, his hands shaking with drink and pride. "Get out of my house," he shouted. His voice cracked through the chatter like lightning. "You're a disgrace. A single mother, living off handouts, parading your mistakes around like trophies. You've failed at everything." The room went silent. The only sound was Lily humming softly as she colored her turkey. For a moment, I thought someone would defend me, that maybe my mother would tell him to stop. But no one spoke. They just stared down at their plates, pretending the mashed potatoes were suddenly fascinating. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not sadness, just a clean, final kind of stillness. I rose slowly, pushed back my chair, and looked at my father. "All right," I said quietly. My voice didn't shake. "If that's how you feel." I helped Lily into her little coat and slipped my arms into mine. She looked up, confused. "Mommy, are we going home?" she whispered. "Yes, baby," I said. "We're going home." No one stopped me. Not one of them said goodbye. The air outside was cold, the November wind sharp enough to sting, but it felt like freedom against my skin. I buckled Lily into the car seat, got behind the wheel, and drove away without looking back. The headlights caught the snow starting to fall, tiny white specks like fragments of a clean page. They had no idea what they had just thrown out of their lives. They had no idea that the mortgage they bragged about paying off last year was quietly settled by me. That the new roof after the storm, the remodeled kitchen, even the tuition for Jenna's oldest son, all of it came from my bank accounts, disguised through shell companies they'd never heard of. They believed my career was a cute project, a boutique marketing firm that made small ads for realtors. They didn't know about Sunbreak Media, the company I built from my living room after Lily was born, or about the Delaware fund that managed my properties across 5 states. They didn't know that the woman they called a failure owned a $112 million empire. I drove to a small motel on the edge of town. The neon sign buzzed and flickered as I checked in under a false name. Lily fell asleep instantly, her tiny hand curled around my finger. I sat on the edge of the bed, the room smelling faintly of disinfectant and old smoke, and stared at my laptop glowing in the dark. I opened my banking portal, my investment dashboards, my company accounts, everything that tethered me to them financially. Then I began cutting strings. First, I canceled the automatic payments that covered their utilities. I paused the company card they used for emergencies, which really meant groceries and gas. I revoked the standing orders that sent money to their joint account every first of the month. With every click, I felt lighter. For the first time, I wasn't trying to buy their love or earn their approval. I was taking my name and my worth back. It wasn't revenge. It was clarity. When I was done, I opened another tab and booked 2 tickets to Honolulu for the next morning. My beach house sat on the North Shore, a quiet stretch of sand and wind where no one asked questions and the ocean didn't talk back. I hadn't been there in almost a year, but I suddenly longed for it. The peace, the space, the sense of belonging to no one but myself and my daughter. I closed the laptop and looked at Lily sleeping beside me. She was 6, all curiosity and sunshine, with a heart too big for this world. She had drawn a turkey for everyone at the table that night, even for the grandfather who had shouted at me. She didn't yet understand cruelty disguised as family love. I brushed a curl from her forehead and whispered, "No more begging to stay where we're not wanted." Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and steady. I thought about the life I'd built from nothing, how I'd worked through nights nursing Lily and writing business plans, how I'd cold-called clients from the kitchen while she napped, how I'd invested every spare dollar into something that grew strong enough to set us free. I'd been underestimating my whole life. That was my secret weapon. People don't fear what they dismiss. They never saw me coming. I used to think that if I just succeeded enough, my family would finally see me, really see me. But that night proved something different. Success doesn't heal wounds people refuse to admit they caused. I wasn't broken because I was single, or because I had a child, or because I chose work over a marriage that nearly ruined me. I was whole, just not in their language. Around midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. Dad didn't mean it. You know how he gets. I stared at it for a long time, then turned the phone off. Some apologies aren't worth waiting for. The heater hummed. Lily murmured something in her sleep and turned over. I lay back on the pillow and watched the shadows move across the ceiling, thinking of the ocean waiting for us. Tomorrow, we'll leave Ohio behind. I'd tell Lily that we were going on an adventure, and she'd believe me, because in her world, adventures always end well. Mine was just beginning again. Before I closed my eyes, I imagined walking into that house next year. Not their house, but mine, the one in Hawaii, the one with glass walls that open to the sea. I imagined setting a table not of judgment but of peace, with laughter and music and people who didn't need to be impressed. Maybe someday, I'd have that Thanksgiving. But for now, it was enough to know I had walked away and not looked back. The woman they called a disgrace was flying toward the horizon. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. The morning after Thanksgiving felt both sharp and silent, like the world had been reset overnight. The motel curtains glowed faint orange with the sunrise, and the air smelled faintly of burnt coffee from the lobby below. I sat on the edge of the bed, a thin paper cup of coffee cooling in my hands, my laptop open on my knees. The room's cheap heater rattled in the corner, but I didn't mind. I'd been in worse places, and this one had Wi-Fi. Lily was still asleep, her hair fanned out on the pillow, her tiny fingers gripping the corner of her blanket. Looking at her reminded me of why I could never go back. I had to build something new, something no one could take from us again. I took a deep breath, sipped the bitter coffee, and began. The first window I opened was my main banking portal. The numbers blinked up at me, rows of accounts, all healthy, all growing. I clicked into the section labeled personal disbursements and started the slow, deliberate process of shutting every door that led back to my family. I canceled the automatic transfer that covered my parents' mortgage, then the one who paid their gas and electricity. The prepaid grocery card I topped up every 2 weeks. I stopped it cold. Next came my father's truck lease, the one he boasted about paying for in full. That payment ended, too. Each click felt like a heartbeat, steady and final. When I finished, I opened the shared wallet I'd created for my brother and sister, supposedly to help with emergencies. I froze the cards. I redirected the account into a holding folder that only I could access. I stared at the screen for a long moment before exhaling. They would wake up to declined payments and confusion, and maybe that was harsh, but I couldn't be the quiet savior anymore. Love built on dependence isn't love. It's control disguised as gratitude. Then I moved on to the trusts. Years ago, I'd set up small educational accounts for my niece and nephew. Those children didn't deserve to suffer because of their parents' pride. So I transferred those funds into a separate vault with my attorney, Denise Cole, in New York. Denise was one of the few people who actually knew the truth about my finances. I sent her a short message. Reassign the minors' trusts under your guardianship. Family contact revoked. Keep all distributions uninterrupted. Confirm once done. Denise would handle it without question.
She always did.
Money, I reminded myself, is not love. It's a tool. It can build or it can trap. And for years, I'd used it to keep my family comfortable enough to ignore me. I thought I could buy peace. But you can't purchase respect from people who resent your success. Next, I drafted an email to Tom Harris, my accountant in Denver, a man with a voice like gravel and the moral compass of a mountain. Morning, Tom. Shift $1.8 million from North Shore Homes into a community fund for single parents in Cleveland and Detroit. Anonymous donations only. Set recurring quarterly contributions. No press, no name attached. It wasn't revenge. It was a redirection. If I were going to pull my money from people who didn't value kindness, I'd send it to those who needed it most. When I hit send, a strange calm settled over me. I closed my eyes for a moment and listened to the faint hum of passing cars on the freeway outside. The sun was higher now, slicing through the blinds in narrow golden lines. I opened my phone and scrolled through my contacts. First, I texted Maria, my neighbor in Santa Monica, asking her to collect my mail. Then, Daniel, my property manager in Miami, postponed the Coral Gables renovation until I returned. I checked the rental reports for my units in Austin and Denver. Occupancy was high, tenants were current, and revenue was solid. My empire, as my lawyer once called it, ran like a quiet machine. Still, the idea of empire never sat right with me. What I'd built wasn't about dominance. It was about survival. Every property, every business, every dollar I earned was a brick in the wall I'd built to protect my daughter and me. When Lily finally stirred, she sat up, rubbed her eyes, and blinked at me. "Mommy, are we going to the beach house today?" she asked. "Yes," I said, smiling. "Today." She grinned, still half asleep, and curled into my lap. I kissed the top of her head, breathing in the scent of shampoo and innocence. For the first time in months, my chest didn't feel heavy. We left the motel after breakfast, instant waffles and orange juice from a paper cup. At the rental counter, I traded our old car for a sleek black SUV. I loaded our suitcases, the laptop, and Lily's stuffed dolphin into the back. As I slid into the driver's seat, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyes looked tired but alive. Driving to the airport, I thought about everything I'd cut off that morning. The guilt came in short, sharp waves. Cutting people loose feels cruel, even when it's necessary. But every time I doubted myself, I remembered the sound of my father's voice telling me to get out of his house. The house I'd paid for. The moment replayed like a film I didn't ask to star in. At the airport, I handled the check-in quietly. No one knew my name there. I was just another traveler with a child and 2 suitcases. I used points for first class. Points I never redeemed because I hated the attention. But today wasn't about humility.
It was about ease.
Lily deserved comfort after all the tension she'd felt the night before. On the plane, she pressed her nose to the window as we lifted through the clouds. "It looks like snow but soft," she said. I smiled. That's the sky welcoming us. I closed my eyes, letting the hum of the engines drown out the noise in my head. Every ending sounds like chaos at first, but there's peace inside the storm if you listen closely enough. Halfway through the flight, I opened my laptop again. Not to work, just to look at the numbers that represented freedom. Sunbreak Media was set for its biggest quarter yet. Our ad campaigns for small American brands were thriving. Eco-home builders in Colorado, women-owned bakeries in Chicago, and a new solar tech startup in Arizona. My team ran everything like clockwork. I could disappear for a month, and it would all keep running. That was by design. I remembered when I used to beg for clients to take a chance on me. Those days of typing proposals at 2 a.m., rocking Lily in one arm while editing copy with the other. No one saw those nights. No one applauded them. But they were the foundation of everything I now owned. When the pilot announced our descent into Honolulu, Lily clapped her hands. I looked out the window. The Pacific stretched wide and blue, the sun glowing like forgiveness. As the wheels touched down, I felt it, the clean break between who I had been and who I was now. The cut wasn't just financial. It was emotional, spiritual, invisible, but absolute. I'd severed the cords that kept me bound to people who couldn't love me unless I was small. Walking through the airport, the air was warm and heavy with salt. Lily skipped beside me, humming. I smiled at her joy and thought, this is what starting over feels like. Tomorrow, I'd wake up to the ocean. I'd drink strong coffee on the lanai and listen to waves instead of criticism. My phone would ring with business, not blame. And maybe, for the first time in years, I'd let myself believe that I'd done the right thing. Because sometimes freedom isn't won in battles. Sometimes it's claimed in silence, with a few clicks, a few words, and the courage to walk away. The beach house waited for us like a promise, low, white, and quiet on the north shore of Oahu. When Lily and I arrived, the air smelled of salt and hibiscus. The Pacific stretched wide and glittering, each wave rolling in as if to remind me how small every other problem really was. Inside, sunlight spilled through glass walls onto pale wood floors. Lily ran barefoot from room to room, her laughter echoing off the empty space. I hadn't been here in almost a year, yet the house still felt alive, as if it had been breathing softly in my absence. This was the one place no one in my family knew about, a secret haven built with my own hands and money. I unpacked slowly, moving through the rooms in silence. The kitchen gleamed with steel and glass, the same counters where I'd once stayed up all night building the first version of Sunbreak Media's website. That night, Lily had been 2 years old, asleep in her high chair, and I'd promised her that one day we'd live without fear or judgment. Looking around now, I realized I'd kept that promise. I cooked eggs and brewed strong coffee, the scent of both wrapping around me like comfort. Standing on the lanai, I watched the water move under a pale morning sun. He called me a disgrace, I whispered to the sea. The waves didn't answer. They just kept moving, patient and sure. Maybe that was what healing looked like, motion without apology. By late morning, I was on a call with Denise, my lawyer in New York, and Grace, my lead developer in Seattle. Their faces glowed on my laptop screen. Back in Hawaii? Grace asked, smiling. Yeah, I said. I needed quiet. We reviewed the numbers. Sunbreak Media's holiday campaigns were breaking records. 4 new clients in Los Angeles and Chicago, 1 investor in Boston, are ready to add $7 million to the North Shore housing project. I told Grace, no flipping homes. We fix roofs, not families. She nodded. Denise, efficient as always, added, the Delaware funds at $62 million, with another $50 in real estate. You're stable, even after those transfers yesterday. I leaned back, letting that sink in. Stable. A word I'd chased for years. My family had seen chaos. I'd built structure. They called it luck. I called it labor. After the call, I opened my leather notebook and wrote 3 letters I'd never send. To my mother. You loved me best when I was small. I am still your daughter, but I choose safety now. To my father, strength isn't shouting. It's care. You lost me when you chose pride over kindness, and to myself, you are not the names they gave you. You are the builder, the keeper of the door. I folded them and placed them in a drawer beside seashells and an old photo of Lily holding a sparkler. The past belonged there, kept, not carried. That afternoon, I walked the beach barefoot, the sand warm beneath my feet. The ocean glittered, alive with surfers and wind. A dog barked somewhere down the shore, and I smiled at the ordinary beauty of it all. For the first time in months, my thoughts didn't feel like work. America spread out before me in my mind, vast, flawed, forgiving. I'd built my empire on its open roads and restless promise. In California, I'd learned independence. In New York, discipline. In Ohio, resilience. Now, Hawaii was teaching me grace. When I returned to the house, Lily was drawing hearts in the sand outside. Mommy, can we stay forever? She asked. Maybe, I said, and meant it. That evening, I grilled shrimp and cut pineapple, and we ate on the lanai as the sun turned the sky to rose and gold. Lily told me stories about imaginary dolphins. I listened, realizing how much of her childhood I had missed while I was busy saving us. But the sacrifice had been worth it. Every hour I worked, every risk I took, had led to this table, just the two of us, safe and full. After she fell asleep, I opened my laptop again. Not for profit, but for purpose. I drafted a plan to start a fund for single mothers, grants, not loans. Enough to cover rent, daycare, or a fresh start. I'd call it the Lily Fund. Something that grows, something that survives storms. As I typed, I caught my reflection in the dark glass, tired, sun-kissed, free. I had spent so long proving my worth to people who refused to see it. Now I was done performing. Success didn't need witnesses. It needed purpose. Outside, the tide crept higher, the waves whispering against the shore like a steady heartbeat. I closed the computer and let the sound fill the silence. I thought about my father's words, disgrace, and realized they no longer hurt. They belonged to a man who'd never learned that strength can be gentle. I would teach Lily differently. The night settled softly around the house. Somewhere beyond the horizon, my old life was collapsing under its own lies, but here, everything was calm. Tomorrow there'd be more meetings, more choices, more work, but for now there was peace. I stepped outside one last time. The sky was black velvet, the stars like scattered coins. The air tasted of salt and freedom. I closed my eyes and whispered a quiet truth to the sea. I am not their disgrace. I am my own beginning. The waves answered by rolling forward, steady, endless, unafraid. Days in Hawaii fell into a rhythm that felt like breathing again. Mornings began with the sound of the ocean, soft and certain, like a metronome for the soul. I'd swim at sunrise, letting the salt water wake me more gently than coffee ever could. Afterward, I'd work on the lanai while Lily built sandcastles at the edge of the lawn. We'd have lunch together, grilled cheese or mangoes and rice, then spend the afternoons reading or walking along the shore collecting shells. The chaos of Ohio felt far away, like a storm I'd outrun. But peace never lasts unchallenged. It was a Tuesday when my phone finally rang. I recognized the number immediately, Mark. My brother. For a moment, I almost didn't answer. But I did. "You can't do this," he started, his voice sharp and shaking. "Mom and Dad's power was cut this morning. The grocery card isn't working. Dad's truck payment bounced. What the hell is going on?" I took a slow breath. "I told you," I said quietly. "I'm done funding cruelty." "Cruelty," he snapped. "It was just words. You know how Dad gets when he's angry." "Words are the first walls," I said. "You build enough of them and no one can get out." He went silent for a long moment. Then he muttered something I couldn't quite catch, something between guilt and pride, and hung up. I set the phone down and let the quiet settle. The waves outside didn't pause. Boundaries, I reminded myself, are bright lines. They stay bright only if you refuse to smudge them. The next morning, I woke before dawn and sat at my desk overlooking the sea. I opened a new document and titled it Bright Lines. It wasn't a business plan, not exactly. It was a manifesto, a reminder. I wrote, "I will no longer confuse love with tolerance. I will no longer pay for peace that isn't real. I will no longer shrink to fit old expectations." When I finished, I sent 3 emails. The first went to Denise, instructing her to finalize a $5 million donation split between women's shelters in Los Angeles, Houston, and Atlanta. The second went to Tom, my accountant, asking him to establish a program to buy small homes in Cleveland and Buffalo, fix them, and rent them at fair prices to single parents. The third went to Grace, authorizing an 8% raise across my company and a new childcare stipend for all employees. By lunchtime, the paperwork was already moving. It's funny how power feels when you use it differently, not to protect yourself, but to lift others. For the first time in months, I slept through the night without waking in panic. The next few days were simple, even joyful. I bought Lily a small used guitar from a shop in Honolulu, $120, slightly scuffed but perfect. She spent hours strumming on the porch, singing nonsense songs that sounded like happiness. By the second day, she could play Happy Birthday from memory. Her laugh filled the house, and every note reminded me why I'd chosen this path. One evening, as the sun slipped behind the water, I stood barefoot at the edge of the lawn, where the grass met the sand. The air was warm, the light soft and golden. For the first time since walking out my father's house, I said the truth out loud. I am a single mother, I said to the horizon. I am not a failure. I built a $112 million empire while changing diapers and taking red-eye flights. I keep roofs over families. I keep people employed. I do not beg to sit at any table that calls me less. The wind caught my hair, lifting it gently like a hand. A wave rolled toward me, broke at my feet, and slid back, leaving behind a shimmer of foam. It felt like the world nodding in agreement. Behind me, I heard small footsteps. Lily came running across the lawn, her guitar swinging from her arm. "Mommy," she said, breathless. "Are we going home soon?" I smiled and knelt beside her. "We're home," I said softly. "Wherever we are safe, wherever we are kind, that's our house." She grinned, thinking about that for a moment, then nodded as if I'd just given her a secret. Together, we walked back toward the porch. The house glowed with the soft amber light of evening. Inside, I could see the stack of mail I hadn't opened yet, contracts from Grace, letters from Denise, and an envelope from the foundation. Tomorrow, I'd deal with all of it. Tonight was for peace. Later, after I tucked Lily into bed, I stood on the lanai again, watching the sky fade to indigo. I thought about Thanksgiving and the way my father's words had cut through that crowded room. For so long, I believed that family was something sacred and unbreakable, but now I understood it differently. Family isn't who you're born to, it's who stands with you when the world goes quiet. I no longer felt angry. I no longer needed revenge or even understanding. What I wanted was distance, honesty, and space to build something better. Boundaries weren't punishment. They were protection. In the days that followed, I planned our next steps. I scheduled a spring trip to New York to meet new investors and visit Denise in person. Grace was eager to expand Sunbreak Media's housing initiative, and I agreed. We'd bring it to more cities: Baltimore, Kansas City, maybe Dallas. The map of America in my mind looked like a web of possibility, bright threads connecting every place where kindness still had room to grow. Sometimes, at night, I imagine what my parents were saying back in Ohio. Maybe my mother cried when the power shut off. Maybe my father cursed my name. Or maybe, just maybe, they finally realized what they had lost. Either way, it wasn't my burden anymore. You can't teach compassion to people who use love like currency. One Sunday morning, I woke before sunrise and watched the first light hit the ocean. Lily was still asleep, her small body curled beneath a blanket of shells she'd collected. I thought of all the women I'd met through work, mothers who'd fought their way out of impossible situations, women who built lives from ashes. I wasn't alone. I was one of them. The ocean shimmered pink and gold, endless and alive. I whispered, "This is my life now." And it felt true. When Thanksgiving came again, I didn't fly back to Ohio. I stayed in Hawaii and cooked for the friends I'd made here. Grace flew in from Seattle, Denise from New York, and even Tom from Denver. We ate on the beach, barefoot, laughing as the tide crept closer. I didn't set a place for anyone who had hurt me. I didn't need to. For the first time, I hosted a table that was mine entirely. No judgment, no apologies, no walls. Just warmth, laughter, and gratitude paid in full dollars and open hands. I raised my glass to the sky and said, "To bright lines, and to never crossing them again."